Tom strolled through the front door of his country house on Wednesday morning. He hadn't been there since last Sunday. He just wanted to pick up a few things and leave again. He expected his wife Peggy to be off to work. Tom went into the kitchen to make a cup of coffee and noticed the handcuffs and strip of duct tape were still on the table where he'd left them. The kitchen towel was still on the floor where he'd thrown it after wiping his face. The video camera was still on the tripod next to the kitchen table. The chair he'd broken and knocked over was still on the floor. Instead of coffee, Tom reached for a bottle of Diet Coke from the fridge. "Where have you been, Peggy?" he asked, looking up from the fridge. "I've been wondering where you've got to," Peggy replied, looking at him angrily. "I asked you a question," she said, grabbing his arm. "I want an answer," she added. Tom stopped and turned to look at her. The woman he'd married 7 years ago. The woman he loved, but now the woman who'd devastated him. He said softly. Peg looked at him, but there was no expression on his face. Tom's eyes seemed dull and lifeless. She let go of his hand and let him pass. Peg picked up the handcuffs, duct tape, and kitchen towel and walked over to. She tossed them in the trash can without any ceremony. She walked over to the tripod and unscrewed the mounting bracket, placing the camcorder on the table. Then she folded the tripod and placed it next to her. Peggy headed for the bedroom. Tom had a large open suitcase on the bed and was packing. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm packing," he replied. "I'm going on another business trip," she replied, her tone sneering. "Then where are you headed?" Tom stopped and looked at her. The expression on his face was still blank. "It doesn't matter," Peg said. "You're my husband. I have a right to know." "I gave up that right last Sunday afternoon," Tom replied, adding a few more items to the bag and closing it. He picked it up and took it into the living room, setting it by the door. He then went to the study with Peggy following him. He put some papers from the desk into his briefcase and closed it. He then packed the laptop and power cord into the computer bag. Tom walked over to the kitchen table and picked up the video camera. He opened it, finding the SD card is still in place. "Is this what you recorded on Sunday?" Peggy smiled. "A souvenir of your payback." "That's very thoughtful. Thank you." Tom remained impassive. Peggy shouted, "Tom, talk to me." Tom looked at her. His face flashed with anger. "What have you done to me? Why are you leaving?" Peggy sat at the table with Tom. He opened his computer bag and put the laptop on the table. He sat down in front of it and gestured for Peggy to sit next to him. Once she was seated, he inserted the SD card into the slot and said, "Let's have a look at this, then we'll have a conversation." He started the tape. The video showed a chair pushed away from the kitchen table. "Right, and there's an empty kitchen table on the left. Welcome home, baby, come on into the kitchen. I have a surprise I promised you on the phone." Tom appeared on the scene, smiling. Peggy walked up to him, dressed in a short, thin robe. Her hair and makeup were immaculate, and her feet were barefoot. She held the handcuffs in her hands and smiled. Peggy sat down in the chair, and Tom sat smiling at her. Peggy went behind the chair and squatted down to cuff him. Her robe fell open, but there was nothing to hide underneath. She slid one wrist into the cuff, looped the chain through the back of the chair, and then secured the other wrist. Peggy stepped out of the frame, then returned a moment later and covered. She taped his mouth shut, but he still smiled. She stood in front of him and dropped her robe to the floor. Tom's eyes widened with delight. "Are you ready for your surprise?" she asked, smiling. Tom nodded. "We're ready here," she called out a moment later. Footsteps were heard. As soon as he heard footsteps, Tom turned his head. A man in his robe came into the room. Tom's smile disappeared, replaced by shock. "Honey, you remember Joey from my work, don't you?" Peggy walked over to Joey and untied the belt on the robe. She then pulled it off his shoulders and tossed it into Tom's lap. "Peggy, why did you stop the video?" "I don't know, Peggy. I have no idea what you're talking about." "Tom, you were still impassive before we got married. I told you I was going to do it." Tom was puzzled. Your words didn't make any sense. What did it all mean? Before we were married, I told you that if you ever cheated on me, I would make love to you in revenge and do it right in front of you. You remember that, don't you? This is your payback. I promised and I delivered. She said as if nothing had happened. You think I cheated on you. I know you cheated on me. Okay, I'll ask Peggy. When did I ever cheat on you? Don't try that on. Tom pulled out the SD card and put it in his bag. He closed the laptop and slipped it into his bag, then zipped it up. He turned to face Peggy again. Either tell me what the hell you're talking about or I'm leaving right now. Tom was upset. Okay, don't act innocent while you were on this, so... I was on a business trip last week when I got a call from Jerry's wife, Jill. She told me that you and Jerry spent the week in bed with a couple of call girls. Jill told you that she did what, and I'm curious as to what proof she gave you. Stop with the victim blaming, Tom. You know what you did, so you retaliated by making love in front of me. I did it based on a phone call from someone I trust. I didn't have any proof. I didn't need any. You handcuffed me and slept with a man right in front of me. You humiliated me. You did it based on what someone told you. That's payback. That's exactly what I did. Tom shook his head, still puzzled. You didn't tell me why you didn't talk to me about it. You decided I was guilty and deserved to be punished, and then you carried it out without any evidence at all. So now we're even. Yeah, even though it doesn't matter now. There are a couple of things I'd like to say. Go ahead. I'm listening. I was at a conference all last week. Jerry wasn't even there. He was fired from the company 2 months ago for having an affair with the receptionist at the office, and I haven't seen him or heard from him since he left. I was a speaker at a conference. I sat at a table on stage from 7 in the morning to 10 at night. Every night during the conference, the whole week was filmed. After the sessions, the group met daily until midnight to discuss and plan the next day. I have lots of witnesses who can confirm where I was. I never left the hotel until I went to the airport after it was over, so you can deny it if you want, but I have proof of where I was and what I was doing the whole time. She has a phone call from someone who wasn't even there as proof, which doesn't sound very reliable to me, but I believe her. What we believe doesn't make it true. I always thought I was married to the most wonderful, loving woman in the world. What I learned on Sunday is that I am married to a flawed, evil woman who thinks so little of me that she has both physically and emotionally humiliated me without any actual evidence of any wrongdoing. Peggy didn't respond. I'm leaving now. You'll hear from my attorney in the next few days. I'm not going to divorce you. That's what this was all about. Now we're even. Peggy, I didn't cheat on you, right? I listened. You still think what you did? I was justified. Then we have nothing more to discuss. We should definitely call Jill and find out what evidence she had. I'd really like to know, though. It doesn't really matter much right now. Without another word, Tom walked out of the house and went to his hotel room, where he burned the video onto 3 DVDs. He had already made an appointment with his attorney and gone to the place where he had started the divorce proceedings. He planned to file for divorce on the grounds of adultery. He gave a copy of the DVD to his attorney. He wanted to make sure that the prenuptial agreement would be valid. Tom handed the documents to Peggy when they were filed. The attorney gave him some advice about financial matters that needed to be taken care of immediately, and Tom did that as soon as he left the attorney's office. He turned off his cell phone, and when he got to his hotel room, he checked it. The first call from Peggy came in about 5 minutes after he left. Then nothing was heard for about 2 hours. After that, calls came in every 5 minutes or so. He listened to only one voice message, the first one after the 2-hour break. Tom took a 1-hour break. Oh my God, Tom. I finally got through to Jill. She was drunk. Please call me. I made a mistake. Please call me. Tom called Sean's father, mother, and sister back. Hey Sean, it's Tom. I know who you are. You're not the only one who can read. What did you do to my daughter? I didn't do anything except not return her calls. Oh damn it, she's hysterical. What the hell is going on, Shan? If you want to know what, you'll have to talk to Peggy. What happened? You're going to have to talk to Peggy. I'm talking to you. He was angry. You're wasting your time. Talk to her. Tom remained calm and civil. Did you sleep with someone or something? Talk to Peggy. I should come over there and kick your ass. Sean, listen to me. If you want to know what happened, you're going to have to talk to Peggy. I'm not discussing this with you or Mary or anyone else. Talk to Peggy. You really cheated on her, didn't you? Goodbye, Sean. Tom ended the call. Sean called back almost immediately, but Tom ignored him. This was quickly followed by a call from Mary, his mother. He deleted their voicemails, and then went too. On Thursday, he had dinner and went back to his room for the night. In the morning, he bought a new mobile phone but kept his old one too. He went to his office and took an extended holiday. He also gave them his new number, but asked them not to share it. When he got to the other end of town, he rented a small furnished apartment and signed a 6-month lease. Tom went to the grocery store for food and supplies. By the end of the day, he had the house in order. Friday morning, his lawyer called. He met his attorney at the courthouse, signed the papers, and after filing, he was given a copy for Peggy. Her copy didn't require a signature. but the attorney told him to be sure there was an impartial witness to what she was served. Tom called Peggy, and they arranged to meet for lunch at a restaurant they often go to. When Peggy arrived, Tom was already waiting for her at a quiet table at the back of the room. She was dressed. Peggy looked well as she approached. She was dressed in a duffel coat. She went to sit down opposite Tom. She put her arms around him and tried to kiss him. He only put up his cheek. It wasn't what Peggy had hoped for. She sat down at the table facing him. She looked upset. She said, "Tom, I've made a mistake. I want us to put it behind us and move forward. I think we need to forget about this and move on." "I agree. It's time to move forward." Tom didn't take the waiter's service. It was Lynn he'd known for a long time. "What can I get you to drink?" she asked, smiling. "I'll have 2 Diet Cokes," Peggy replied. "She said she'd stay a minute," Tom asked. He reached out and Peggy was handed the divorce papers. "Peggy, these are the divorce papers. Lynn is my witness that you have been notified." "Thank you, Lynn. I'm moving forward, but Tom, I made a mistake. That's not what I meant. Peggy, we've been married for 7 years. Until Sunday, they were the best years of my life. I love you like I've never loved anyone, and probably never will again. Don't throw that away, Tom. We have a great marriage. It was, but it won't be. Last Sunday, you ruined our marriage and my love. I made a mistake. Don't you see that? Let me tell you what I see when I look at you, or when I close my eyes. I see the woman I loved, not the woman I cherished. You killed her that day. But Tom, it was all a mistake. It was no mistake, Tom. I told you if you cheated on me, I'd make love and revenge in front of you. You knew what would happen and agreed to it. I did it knowing it would never come to that. What did I tell you? Peggy lowered her gaze to the table. You said you'd divorce me. Did you agree to that? Yes, but I didn't cheat on you. Tom held out a DVD to her. This is for you. It's a copy of your not cheating thing with Big Joey Tom. It wasn't cheating. It was revenge. Lynn returned. Peggy, love outside of marriage is adultery. It's considered cheating unless both parties agree. We can work this out. Tom, we'll see a therapist. No, Peg. You showed me the side of you that destroyed the woman I loved. You killed her. You hurt her as much as if you'd cut out her heart. But you didn't. Instead, you ripped out my heart. I don't want a divorce. I will fight you on Sunday. You showed me a different side of you. I have another side too. You don't want to see it. What other side? The side where I become as vicious and evil. As you were on Sunday, I won't use a mistake as an excuse. I'll take full responsibility for my actions. That's not who you are, and you know it. In fact, I was thinking the same thing about you. Damn it, Tom. This was a mistake. No, it was a deliberate act of revenge. What did you tell your... I told my parents we'd had a falling out and that we'd work it out. I told them you were having an affair. I never told them the truth. Why not? They wouldn't understand. I know it was a mistake. I think I'm finally getting it, Tom. I know what I did to you was wrong. I based it more on judgment than fact. I know I hurt you deeply, but we can get past this. We can rebuild our marriage. We can put this behind us. We'll put this marriage behind us, the woman I loved. I'm not going to back down. I'm going to fight you every step of the way. I'm saving our marriage. There's nothing to save. It's over. Don't make me reveal my other side. You won't like it. You're bluffing. Don't push it. Peggy, get a lawyer. Ask them to review the petition. Ask them to contact my lawyer if you have any questions. You'll be single, and you can have as much Joey as you want in 90 days. This has nothing to do with Joey. I'm sorry that was rude of me. I apologize. I'm not leaving you, Peg. You already have the settlement. It's fair. Accept it and move on. There's no way in hell Lynn brought them food. Tom handed her his. She left and came back with a check for him to sign. Tom signed it and stood up. He hadn't touched his food. Enjoy your meal, Peggy. I lost my appetite last Sunday when you spat on me. Tom left and went to his house on Tuesday. Peggy met her lawyer for This was the first time she was a challenging client who was recommended by a friend. Have a seat, Mrs. Savage. I'm Ronnie Savage. How can I help you? She said her husband was trying to divorce her. He served her with papers last Friday. May I see them? Peggy held out the papers to her. Ronnie looked at them. Is it true that he's citing adultery on the first page? No, it was a misunderstanding. Were you in love with someone other than your husband? Yes, but it was a mistake. Did your husband consent to making love to another person? Not specifically with this person, but he agreed to me making love in if he cheated on you, then your husband did too. It was revenge. Well, yes and no, Mrs. Given. I did have a revenge love affair, but then I found out he wasn't cheating on me. Your husband wasn't cheating, but you still had a revenge love affair. I did, Mrs. Given. It's called adultery, but I thought he was cheating. What proof did you have? A friend told me he did it, but apparently your friend was wrong. Yes, finally someone who sees that it was a mistake. Mrs. Given, based on what you have told me, I am dating a woman who made love, and she was retaliating against her husband based on hearsay evidence. Did he have proof that you had an affair with another man? Yes. I handcuffed him to a chair and made him watch. That makes it his word against yours. Is there any actual proof? I videotaped the whole thing. Do you have a copy of that video? Peggy held out. Peggy handed over the DVD that Tom had given her on Friday. Ronnie put it on the player, and after watching only a few minutes, she stopped it. She said she'd need to watch the whole thing, but she could do that later. She started to read the petition after familiarizing herself with it. After looking through a few pages, Ronnie looked up. He noticed that you had signed a prenuptial agreement, which seemed pretty solid when it came to adultery. If he changed the wording of the complaint to irreconcilable differences, we could avoid that part. I suspect that will be the case. Even with the prenup he's offering you, it'll be tough to get what you want. Without a prenup, you'll probably get a much bigger cash payment. I don't want a cash payout, and I don't want a divorce. I want my husband back. You told him that, but he didn't believe you. Even if we do consider it, contested divorces can be very expensive for everyone involved. If we get counseling, it can't hurt. Let's do it. We can seek counseling and let him know that if he refuses, we'll fight for everything. Is there anything you can tell us about your husband? Anything at all? He's as clean as a whistle. Has he ever hit you or threatened you? He never even raised his voice to me. I'll go through the paperwork very carefully, watch the video, and get back to you in a day or two. Does he have a copy of that DVD? Peggy nodded. It was Wednesday when Ronnie called her. Mrs. Given that he has a pretty solid case, the video you recorded is very damaging. You don't want any judge to see it, so let's start with what we've been discussing. We're going to offer 6 weeks of family counseling, whatever it takes. I want my husband back. 2 days later, Tom's lawyer called him. He was asked to come in and went to the office that afternoon. They've requested 6 weeks of couples counseling. What if I say no? They'll do everything they can to fight us. I'm against it. What do you think? She hired Ronnie Savage. She's one of the best. She's better than you. I'm the very best. You ready? If I have to, I'll fight tooth and nail. Let's just say no and see what happens. Keep me posted. That night, Tom called Peggy. Peggy, I've given up counseling. I told you that if you argue with me about it, you'll see another side of me that you won't like. Why are you acting like this? Just stop. This crazy divorce and come home, Peg. That's not going to happen. This is your last chance to get off easy. I won't call you anymore. I'm fighting you, Tom. I don't want a divorce. Have it your way, Tom. He ended the call the following Monday. Peggy filed a countersuit. The grounds were irreconcilable differences. She asked for everything. 2 days later, the local school board and the school where Peggy worked were served with documents. Peggy and Joseph Care attached to the package were some pretty explicit photos of the two of them having sex. The school board called an emergency meeting and fired them both that same day. Joey's wife got a DVD in the mail with the names and phone numbers of those in the video. She called Tom after watching it. Tammy Carr, Joey's wife, did you send me that DVD? Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry, but I thought you had a right to know. When was this made? A week ago, Sunday at my house. Is that you sitting in the chair? Yes, and the video is real, totally. It's not edited. Is this woman your wife? Yes, for the moment. I filed for divorce. That's all I needed to know. I'm sorry to bother you. Peggy was also reprimanded for exposing him with her act of revenge, which cost him his job and possibly his marriage. Even after losing her job and Joey's call, Peggy didn't give up. Another week passed with no word from Tom or his lawyer. Tom took his next step when Peggy's parents and sister received a copy of the DVD in the mail. After a brief introduction to the video, they began asking Peggy questions and reprimanding her. His old mobile phone rang. He answered his sister's call. How could you, Tom? Peggy loves you, Mandy. She has a strange way of showing it. It was revenge love, for God's sake. So she still hasn't told you the truth. What the hell is the truth, Mandy? I wasn't having an affair. She got a call from a friend who said I did. She took it at face value and without any proof. This was her revenge. Tom, Peggy's not that stupid. Well, ask her yourself. Let her if she lets the divorce go through and stops fighting it, that's the end of it. If she keeps going, that's just the beginning. You need to deal with this. Have you watched the DVD? Just the beginning, that's all I could digest. Observe all of this and then ask yourself if your husband is willing to try to reconcile. Would you do that? I will, but I still think you should at least try to work it out. Mandy, you've known me since we were kids. You know I'm not a bad guy. Watch the DVD, okay? I will. Mandy hung up the phone about an hour later and called back. Oh, Tom, I'm so sorry. I understand now, but I still need to talk to Peggy. Let her know that if she stops fighting the divorce, this will be the end of it. If she fights me, it's only going to get worse. I'll tell her. Mandy went to see Peggy in person, and after getting confirmation that Tom was telling the truth, relayed. Peggy was really firm in her refusal. Mandy then told her parents what Peggy had done and how Tom said she should drop the countersuit. Peggy's parents visited her that night and got copies of both documents. Sean had a family friend who was an attorney who reviewed the documents and the prenup. He said that Peggy should do exactly what Tom said and take the matter to divorce court. After another week without a word from his attorney, Tom took the next step. Peggy was teaching Sunday school at the same church her parents attended, and every member of the women's auxiliary and the church's ministers received a flyer in the mail. It had pictures of Peggy making love to a man who was not her husband, and the caption read, "Should this woman be teaching your children on Sunday?" Peggy's parents were treated more like lepers than parishioners. After the service, the pastor took them aside for a private conversation and explained why he also gave them a letter for Peggy. It informed them that her services would no longer be needed or even welcomed. A copy of the flyer was enclosed. When they gave it to Peggy, she cried but still refused to drop her counterclaim. Peggy told her lawyer what Tom had done. Telling and showing her family was not a crime. Peggy told Tom that she had made the tape for him since it was his property, so he could share it with any adult he wanted to. The flyers were sent out anonymously, so without a thorough investigation, they couldn't be traced back to Tom. Ronnie recommended that she drop her countersuit, and her family begged her to do the same. Sean called Tom and shared his concerns. Tom repeated his demand to Sean. A few days later, Peggy's neighbors and all their friends received similar flyers, signed only with Peggy's name and contact information. Peggy's phone and email were flooded with nuisance calls and messages. Trash was dumped on her car driveway and lawn. Tom waited another week before posting on her social media accounts. He started with innuendos and then got more explicit, posting photos with blacked out areas. A few days later, Peggy got an email from an adult website thanking her for the video. When a news crew showed up at her door, she finally called her lawyer and dropped the countersuit. She asked for a meeting with Tom, who agreed on the condition that it be done at his attorney's office. They met a few days later, and Peggy looked like a shadow of her former self. She'd lost weight and seemed tired. "Peggy," Tom said, sitting down at the table across from her. "I've dropped the countersuit. You won." "Peggy, I lost. I lost the woman I loved. I lost my marriage. I lost everything that was important to me. There really is a side of you that I've never seen. I'm sorry you had to see it. Tom, I don't know what to say. I can't show my face anywhere. I'd have to leave even to get a job. I can't stay here either. We've all treated you like you're unwelcome here. We've both lost everything, haven't we?" "Yes," Peggy did. Tom's eyes were on the verge of tears. "I know it's too late now, but is there anything I can do to undo what I've done besides figuring out how to turn back time?" "Yeah, besides that, I don't think so." "Peggy," Tom stood up and was ready to leave. Peggy stood up and held out her arms for one last hug. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. Tom took a step towards Peggy, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'm sorry, Peggy. I'd feel like I was cheating on the woman I love." He stood looking at her for a moment, then turned and headed for the door. When his hand touched the doorknob, he turned to her again. "There's one thing that might help," he said. "What?" "Just once. You could say I'm sorry." Tom walked out of the office and out of her life.